Okay. Okay, welcome. And it's so good to see you all back. And, we're now kicking off another series. We recently finished one last year, and now we're looking at leading in these extraordinary times. And I think that we all can agree that we need to change some of our models. We need to think about our leadership, and we need to actually start to integrate some of the things that we're working with in this new environment. So, as we kick off our new series, I'd like to introduce Dr. Art Murray, who is going to give us this overview of these next 6 or 7 series of that we're going to be talking about. And then in the end, we'll have a conversation. Dr. Art Murray is the co-founder and CEO of Applied Knowledge Sciences, Inc., and the director of the Enterprise of the Future program for the International Institute for Knowledge and Innovation. He is an author, written for KM World Magazine, and has led numerous knowledge management projects. His current focus is on human and machine knowledge governance and developing systems in which humans teach machines and machines teach humans, including a system for detecting and responding to weak signals on large complex systems. So with that, I'd like to introduce Art. So Art, can you kick it off and we'll talk about our extraordinary times.
Annie, you bet. Thank you so much. And thank you for organizing this in our second year now of conducting these online educational sessions. I know it's a lot of work putting this together, and we really appreciate your efforts and the efforts of the other members of the team, which we'll be hearing from over the coming weeks. Let me first, I think I'm sharing my screen. Let me see, hit the slideshow here. And hopefully that's going to, there we go. And everybody can see that, right? So this is session 1 of what will be 8 sessions.
Hey, Art, you're kind of
every
fading in
Wednesday
and out.
at this same time topic, right? Voice-wise? Oh yeah. As we mentioned before we started, we've got a little bit slightly unstable internet. Hopefully this is better now. We're okay now. You can hear me?
Yes, sounds much better.
All right, we'll keep our fingers crossed. All right, so this is the first of 8 sessions, and in this I'd like to set the table for what's coming up. The whole series is entitled "Leading in Extraordinary Times." And we'll get into that in this session as to why that's why we settled in on that. So let's talk about what the agenda will be for today, and we'll also go through what's coming up in the ensuing weeks. First, we'll all be interested in what we mean by extraordinary times, and this isn't just going to be me. All of these sessions, we aim to make them interactive. So we will be inviting your participation, your inputs, your insights, your questions. Feel free to chime in, raise your hand using the raise hand button, or use the chat box to enter in any of your thoughts and comments at any time. And we'll be happy to have a discussion as we go along. So extraordinary times will consist of course, extraordinary threats. There are some ominous things happening now and even on the horizon. So that's of great concern, and we're going to definitely talk about those. But also, wherever there's threats, there's opportunity. And we don't want to just focus totally on the negative. We want to say, hey, there's a lot of good things happening, great, exciting things happening. And so we're going to talk about those, outline those, and make sure we understand that this is a part of what defines extraordinary is, this combination of serious threats and exciting opportunities. And then, of course, how do we best seize those, respond to those threats and seize those opportunities? And one key ingredient, and in our Institute for Knowledge and Innovation, we've built a foundation for knowledge management based on 4 pillars. And there have been almost 4 dozen doctoral dissertations built around that framework. So it's been very tightly validated. And those pillars are leadership, organization, technology, and learning. So that first pillar, leadership, as you know, those of you who are in knowledge management understand the importance of that. And so extraordinary times demand extraordinary leadership. And we have, for the coming 6 weeks, the next 6 weeks, you'll hear from one of 6 speakers each week who has spent decades researching a specific style of leadership that lends itself and is very necessary for succeeding in these extraordinary times. I will give you a little bit of flavor. I'll try not to steal the thunder from each of those 6 speakers, but I will definitely give you an overview of what those 6 styles are and how they all tie together. And hopefully that will excite you enough to continue to join us each week for the next 7 weeks. All right, so let's start with what do we mean by extraordinary times? So let's turn it over to you out there. Please use the chat box, and if you would please fill in the chat in one word. How would you define extraordinary? Please put that in. Well, let's see what you have to say about that. Defined in using one word, how would you define extraordinary? No accountability, Sasha. Yes, excellent. And John Lewis says beyond. Steve, challenging. Yes, good word. Steve Newman, AI. Yeah, there you go. AI is center of everybody's mind. Freedom, outstanding, Candace. Glenda, unusual. Lucian, complex, yes. And the pandemic, of course, and hope, and I don't know, there may be more. So yeah, these are extraordinary times, and that pandemic definitely gave us all a wake-up call, that's for sure. Okay, thank you. Let's add some other ones here. And let's see, there you go. There are a lot of ways to characterize extraordinary. These are a few from the Oxford English Dictionary, which has, I think, 250,000 words. So these are words and phrases defining extraordinary. So you can see extraordinary itself covers a wide range of attributes. All the more reason why we need extraordinary leadership if these are indeed extraordinary times. So all of these and the ones that you submitted, I think, accurately capture the what we're facing here. Okay, so that's a simple overview of extraordinary. I think we've kind of adopted. So we embrace that. We know that this is your extraordinary times. So threats and opportunities, right? It's on both sides. So let's take a look at the threat side. And again, let me turn it over to you. What is the one most extraordinary threat that you see happening today that will significantly impact our future, your future and ours? Okay, so write in the chat box, please, just a quick descriptor of what you think is the single most extraordinary threat we're facing. Steve Hausman gave away his topic for next week, climate change, of course, and that's a huge one. Incompetence and mediocrity, Sasha, excellent. Dr. Rudy Garrity will be talking about that in one of our sessions. Very good. Energy transition kind of goes with climate change. The economy, John Lewis, yes, indeed. We have a very fragile economy right now, to say the least. And Lucian says, fiat money to Bitcoin, same thing, right? The part of the fragile economy we have is due to the fragile banking system based on debit depleted fiat currencies. And then what are those alternatives going to be? That's going to demand very extraordinary leadership. When you say indecision, sure. And with all the information floating around, misinformation, it's hard to make a decision when there's so many variables. There's a huge degree of complexity. Again, Ron Young agrees to the economy. Steve Hausman, again, political corruption, of course, yes. Politics, the media, even corporations. You say, wow, what's true and what's not? Who's in whose pocket? That adds to the threats that we're facing. Glenda, national security. Diala, I hope that pronounced your name right. Geopolitics. All right. So again, we have a wide range of threats, and some other ones. There's some of the trends that kind of feed this threat environment. Volume and complexity of our knowledge keeps growing. I would say human and machine knowledge, now that there's AI, as Steve Newman mentioned in one of his comments. So there's the complexity and volume of information, as well as the speed, right, and machine knowledge. All of this knowledge and information is growing faster, creating added risk, disruptive characteristics, and which means we need to stay out in front, at least try and keep ahead of this. But it's very difficult just keeping up with all of the changes. Here's what I'd like to do as an exercise whenever we do workshops. And so just in your own, maybe on a blank sheet of paper, just for yourself, keep track of these things. Have you heard of the 5 V's of information? The 5 V's characterize the current state of the information that we're facing, and it applies to knowledge as well. Those 5 V's are, the first one, volume. So with respect to the volume of information, just kind of on your own, if you have some comments you want to share, please chime in. But a good thought exercise is to say, with respect to the volume of information, do you feel you or your organization, you and your organization, are falling behind? Are you catching up, keeping pace, or hopefully leading the charge with respect to the volume? And that volume can be quite overwhelming. Second V, velocity. So not only is the volume increasing, but the speed at which that increasing volume of information is thrown at us is increasing. Yeah, and Annie says we're falling behind. Yeah, that's a struggle that people are facing. So true, Annie. Okay. Next V is variety. So in addition to this large volume and information coming at us at high speed, is a wide variety of information. And how do we ferret that out? How do we assimilate that, sort that out, characterize it, decide what's important, what's not? And then coupled with that is veracity, right? How do we know what's true, what's real, what's fake? And part of that AI problem that Steve Newman mentioned in one of his comments in the chat is, how do we know what's true, what's real? And with AI now, the capacity of AI to generate fake news, fake information, that's definitely a problem we're facing. And then, of course, the value. If you have large volumes of velocity come at you in a variety of ways at high volume and high speed, how do you sort out which is of value? How do you sort out the garbage, or at least the things that are insignificant or inconsequential to your particular world, your particular organization? And then how do you extract that particular, the information segments that are of maximum value to you? And again, with all 5 of those V's, are you falling behind, catching up, keeping pace, leading the charge? So these slides will be available to you as a registrant. And so you can use this as a worksheet. I think it's a good handy dandy worksheet to try and keep reminding us of the different aspects of the information. And again, you can apply it to knowledge as well, that we're going to have to manage and keep our fingers on the pulse of. Okay. All right, moving on. So some of the additional threats we're facing: exponential growth of AI. We've talked about that. Socioeconomics. Some people mentioned that in the chat. Most people agree these current financial systems and models are unsustainable. The climate aspects, which Steve is going to talk about, Steve Hausman. Supply chain vulnerabilities, we've seen that suddenly pop up, and that certainly is not going to go away anytime soon. Loss of trust, and you can see recent polls show that trust is going down the tubes in our revered legacy institutions. Education and workforce, that's out of sync right now. There's certain workforce needs that need to be filled, yet tens of thousands are being laid off. There's a huge turnover, turmoil, transition going on in this education workforce love-hate relationship. Geopolitics, of course, is huge. We have hot wars going on right now, cold wars, trade wars, yikes. And then with 8 billion people now, the world population has reached 8 billion. Food, water, natural resources for all of those, for everyone, ensuring that those are available. There you go. Those are just a few, and the ones you've mentioned are some of the many threats that we're facing. So that's the threat side. Another important one I want to point out is, and we've written about this in our previous articles, technology-driven social amplification. That's a kind of a mouthful. What that basically means is, in today's massively networked, interconnected world of spontaneous, instantaneous communication, tiny spark unravels. Now, you've seen this, where one single tweet, right, coming across can suddenly can kick off rioting. 2/3 of the US adult population here in the US get their news from social media, right? And so that means that light speed, public opinion can change, and memes are the main mode of communication, becoming the main mode of communication. That's kind of crazy, because a meme is just one small snippet taken out of context, but this is truly what's happening. You've seen this happen. It is a very serious problem. We call that technology-driven social amplification. Amplification meaning one small meme or tweet gets wildly exaggerated and spreads and goes viral. Here's a great quote by Nick Pigeon. Hazards, whether actual or perceived, interact with psychological, social, institutional, and cultural processes in ways that may amplify or attenuate public response. So this isn't just, we're observing this, but it's not anecdotal. There's the reference here if you want to go to that paper, which spells out in a more rigorous way the research that's been done to point out this phenomenon and what we need to do about it. Okay, so far? All right, we're going to keep going here. Complexity, right, means connecting all of the dots. And we've used some tools before. The Institute for Knowledge and Innovations, who is the sponsor of this series, began at GW, and we had a project one time on economic resilience. And we used, at that time, you might be familiar with the brain. It's a knowledge mapping tool. And we started mapping out the dependencies on that hold our economy together. And, some of you mentioned fragile economy. So just a quick look over this. The point here is I want to show you how we need to, in order to get a handle on this complexity, map out the different components of all these moving parts and how they're all interconnected. So our economy has some very critical sectors, the utilities, public utilities, sewer, water, gas, electric, right? They keep everything running. Community services are first responders to respond to emergencies and crises. Transportation and logistics, there's that supply chain. And they go air, land, sea, everything else, right? All driven by energy, right? In the middle. By the way, can you see my cursor moving, John? Okay, so good. That's good. I don't have that laser pointer. This is my version of a laser pointer when you're doing Zoom. Good to know. So all this is driven by energy, different types of energy, all with different vulnerabilities, different ways of supplying that. And then communication, all this has to be linked, satellite and terrestrial wise, different communication networks. And can you begin to see the vulnerabilities on this? We have healthcare, finance. We didn't even build all of these out. And there's our threats, going back to our threats and vulnerabilities and resilient enterprise. That's one level. 2 levels. Just say, what are the interconnections, the interdependencies across these different things? And clearly you can see each of the utilities depend on telecommunications. Energy depends on transportation and logistics. Food and agriculture depends on all of the above. So you begin to map this out, and wow, you see incredible interdependencies, which then at the same time begin to highlight vulnerabilities. So you say, wow, this is kind of fragile. So we want to make sure we have a handle on this and manage it and have redundancies. And that's where, of course, leadership comes in, as you'll see. There's another, in addition to the brain, we've been lately using something from Trident, TR3, DENT.com. They've got a transformation accelerator. I just pop this up on the screen just to show you. It's yet another one of many mapping tools that are out there. And they've built an ecosystem model for a smart city. And as you've probably, I'm sure, heard of the 15-minute city, right? Where within a city, you at least have the capacity to connect all of these different services and components more tightly coupled and manage them. So this is just another example, but you might want to check out this tool as a modeler of an ecosystem. They've got several ecosystems. We are using it right now to model our business ecosystems, but smart cities are a good example, as well as pick the ecosystem of your choice. Okay. All right then. I want to see, yes, I'm watching the chat box just to make sure if anybody has any questions or thoughts, just chime in, please. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going. All right, so that's the threat side. And we still haven't touched all of the threats, right? So I think we all get the point. It's kind of scary and hairy out there. But let's not look at everything is all negative. There are extraordinary opportunities as well. So let me do the same. If you would please enter into the chat box. Let's hear from you. What is the most extraordinary opportunity that you see emerging that will significantly impact your future and ours? Go ahead and enter that into the chat box. The most extraordinary opportunity. Haven't talked about threats. What are the opportunities? AI? Sure. Now, funny, AI is one of those threats and opportunities, right? People are viewing AI as a threat, and we need to have a moratorium. Oh, it's scary. But the flip side is no. How are we going to all those dots we just saw? We're going to need tools like AI, because no human can possibly keep track of all those moving parts. And likewise, along with AI, collaboration. Diala, thank you. And Sasha, systemic alignment, very good. Both, and I presume, and Sasha, chime in further if you want, but I presume you mean, systemic thinking. We got to have systems thinking, and with a broad systems view of all these moving parts, how are they aligned and even misaligned? We can identify misalignments and things that should be aligned better, looking at it from a systemic point of view. So if that's what you mean, Sasha, excellent. And again, feel free to elaborate, but that's an excellent point. Steve Hausman, again, yeah, our longevity and health span, and you, Steve Hausman, Dr. Steve Hausman comes from the NIH. He's retired from there, but he's spent a long career there working on longevity and health span. So he's definitely a good person to tap if you want to learn the latest in that. Lucian, skills development. Of course, keeping up with these changes requires new sets of skills. Annie, AI and discrimination. So again, discrimination is a problem. AI is an opportunity to help alleviate that, remove that. So definitely, great point, Annie. And Sasha, I guess, says yes. So I think you mean that we kind of got your idea about the systemic approach to alignment. Diala, spiritual connections. Yes, good one. And our sixth leader speaker in session number 7 is going to delve into consciousness, Bill Halal, because we tend to be focused on technology and everything being mechanized, and a little bit scary. Some people talking about wiring up, inserting chips into your brain and almost having this Borg-like future. And yeah, we want technology to help us and aid us and even augment our capacity. But yeah, we must not lose the spiritual side of things. There are great. So there's physical, mental, spiritual, consciousness. We definitely need to pay attention and not not ignore those and focus on those. Yeah, DEIA, Glenda, correct. And new mindsets, Ron Young, over there in the UK, definitely all these changes are going to require new mindsets. John Lewis, in his session coming up in a couple of weeks, definitely focuses on that, as well as giving us a framework for helping to create and lead the creation of that new mindset. All right, excellent comments, everybody. Thank you so much. Love the participation. So again, key strategic leadership question then is, wait a minute, these were all the threats, right? This was our list of some of our threats. Leaders need to, and your comments in this last chain of chat thread, this latest chat thread, brought some of this out. Things that we're seeing as threats, right, are at the same time opportunities. But that kind of says that's really where leadership comes into play, right? So we have a potential treasure trove of opportunities available. Commercial space travel, longevity, Steve mentioned, democratization of knowledge, human-machine augmentation, infrastructure upgrades, smart cities and highways, digitization and the digital twin. This is where the technology part is going to definitely augment and help us. Hyper automation, help things doing more efficiently and effectively. NFTs and Web 3.0. Now that KMGN is having a session on that next week, next Thursday. So keep an eye out open for that. You won't want to miss that. We have 3 experts on distributed automated organizations, non-fungible tokens, and Web 3.0, as well as blockchain. So that's coming up next week on at our sister network, the KM Global Network. Watch out for that announcement coming up next Thursday, a week from tomorrow. Living tissues and 3D printing. There's the blockchain edge computing. We're working with the company right now that's going from edge to cloud, just doing fascinating work. Homomorphic encryption. There's so much vulnerability in cyberspace. Homomorphic encryption is merely a way of reducing some of those vulnerabilities. Quantum computing, same thing. Autonomous transport, driverless cars, driverless airplanes. That's kind of scary. Stem cells and CRISPR. And I put this here. You can view. A lot of these are discussed in our regular series in KM World, the future of the future. That's kind of a long link there. You'll get that in your handout if you download the presentation. But simply, instead of worrying about that long URL, just go to kmworld.com and then check out the future of the future. I think if you scroll down to down the main page, you'll come across the future of the future, and you'll see a series of articles, and each article will talk about one or more of these incredible things that are coming up in the future. Okay, and perhaps the biggest opportunity of all is a world now of 8 billion minds. Let's not forget that. So that's kind of where we may get into consciousness and all. It's easy to get enamored and hypnotized by the bright, shiny object of technology. We have 8 billion different minds. When we talk about diversity, how diverse is 8 billion, right? 8 billion unique individuals with unique ontologies, unique perspectives. There's something that we haven't even begun to tap. So hopefully you'll share, you feel somewhat the excitement that we haven't even begun to tap with regard to that. And these and not all 8 billion are connected. Probably, I think 6 billion. We're getting there. More than 3/4 of our global population is connected in some way. So we're beginning to really bring this together. And again, our last speaker in week 7, Dr. Bill Halal, does talk about what this is doing to consciousness, is creating what's called the noosphere, all right? where all of these interconnected minds form a consciousness unto itself that we can draw upon and tap into and help solve a lot of these threats and a lot of these threats we talked about, and seize the opportunities. Okay. All right, but that leaves one more thing, and that's the leadership part. Somebody else, we need leadership to help change those mindsets, exploit these opportunities, address these problems, have the political will to prioritize and put resources where they need to be placed. And part of leadership is, as the quote here says, instead of people working to serve the leader, which is that old style autocratic leadership, it should be the other way around. The leader exists to serve the people. And the old way clearly isn't working. If, for instance, government should be a model of servant leadership, but as we know, our governments are not doing a very good job. Look at this latest poll from Gallup. This top line is dissatisfaction, 48%. Now, we were at a low of maybe 17% back in 2002. And so in 20 years, just in 2 decades, that we've talked about what? Tripled the level of dissatisfaction. And this is here in the US. Just nuts. So yeah, definitely a leadership problem across the board, and not just government, leaders everywhere, corporate leadership, our educational system, and not just to focus on the US of A, globally, Gallup's poll shows that the negative experience index is at an all-time high, 33%, which consists of sadness, stress, anger, physical pain, worry. That's at an all-time high across the globe, according to Gallup. So, we need this. Now, don't think that, some Lone Ranger, rescue. People always want the knight to come and rescue us. No. But when asked to rate the honesty and ethical standards of people in different professions, what does Gallup have to find? What are Gallup's findings about that? It hasn't changed that much over the past 5 years. I've been watching this closely, and it's been pretty much consistent. The people who rate the honesty and ethical standards by profession, nurses, medical doctors, and pharmacists consistently make the top 3. Guess who do you think is going to be in the bottom 3? There you go. Car salespeople, members of Congress, and I'm sure similar rankings for members of parliament across the globe, and telemarketers. There you go. There's the bottom 3. All right, so that's enough. So there you go. Here's the old style leader saying, "I'm their leader," and today, hey, where did everybody go? All right, new styles of leadership are needed. All right, so one last time, let me turn it over to you in the chat box, please. What do you feel is the most significant trait that a leader must exhibit in order to succeed in ordinary times, in order to lead everyone to success in extraordinary times? What is that one most? What do you think would be a significant trait, or the most significant trait, leadership trait, that's needed to succeed in these extraordinary times? Relationships, yes, very good. Listening, beautiful. Listen, and goes together. Relationships, listening, understanding goes together. Curiosity, sure. Open, wisdom. Could be. Glenda, could you please chime in? I'm not familiar with that acronym. Glenda, could you just unmute yourself? And what does LISTB mean? Oh, listen. I think you mean listen. Was that a typo, right?
Yeah, sorry. I meant listen.
Listen.
I'm sorry.
Hey, that's right. In this acronym-filled world, you never know. I just wanted to check. Okay, yeah, listen.
Sorry about that.
Communication, humanity, right. Authenticity and credibility, right. Those are all great traits. And all right, so we're going to look so now I'm going to set the table for what's coming, and hopefully you will all be able to tune in and even tell your friends and urge your friends to tune in, because we have 6 sessions coming up over the next 6 weeks where a speaker who is an expert in one of these 6 styles of leadership, they've done a lot of research on them, they're going to be presenting, and likewise in an interactive way, the 6 of the styles, and these are the 3 that came out in our work as an institute for succeeding in extraordinary times. Right. So let me go through those very quickly to kind of set the table for what you'll be seeing over the next 6 Wednesdays. All right. First one, Steve Hausman, who's been chiming in here in our chat box. First category will be science-based leadership. In his session, which will be next week, this is session 1. Next week will be session 2, same time, May 24th. The storm is here, consequences of climate change. And Steve is loaded with charts and data to support that. Then we've got foresight, the need for foresight. Annie is going to talk about moving from one of the changes we've got to move from hindsight to foresight and value-driven strategic planning. That's Annie's. John Lewis, change and innovation is his specialty. And so he's going to be talking about leadership-driven, change and innovation-driven leadership and his model for developing that and nurturing that in personally and in organizations. Conversation, that came up, right? A lot of you said you need to listen, you need to have a conversation, you need to have understanding, dialogue, discourse. Nobody's better at that than John Hovell, and he was in our session last year, did a magnificent job of facilitating a conversation among panels of experts. And so again, dialogue, missing in conversational leadership, definitely want to tune into that, because that is so essential to dealing in these extraordinary times. That's a necessary ingredient. To be adaptive, Rudy's going to talk about that. And that is important. You can't be locked in to the old ways. So change, adaptive, and then democratic. Bill Halal will talk about that and how the virtual organization has kind of thrust us into a new style of organization that's more democratic. Those are the coming 6 weeks, right? Week 2 through 7. And then in week 8, we bring it all together. We connect it all together. So definitely we're going to be talking about and focusing on each of these areas, but definitely you'll want to tune in on our last session, July 5th, facilitated by John Hovell, a conversation on tying all of these different aspects together. All right, let me quick go through. We've got a little bit of time. Let me just highlight what each of these will be. I'll try not to steal the thunder from each of these speakers. You'll definitely want to tune in in the following weeks and the weeks to come. But I'll also give you kind of a little bit of introductory thoughts to kind of set up each of these sessions. So next week's session, the storm is here, consequences of climate change. Of course, here are the threats. So, and I'm not going to steal Steve's thunder. He's going to, totally immerse us and he has spent now the past several years diving deep into the climate research, and he's going to share all of his data and findings with us. So again, it's scary, but there are also opportunities. So there are opportunities to do something about it, and that's where leadership comes in. And Steve is going to, give us a headache, and then he's going to give us an aspirin afterward on what to do about that, right? And one of the key things that we should be looking at, especially if you are a futurist, if you have anything to do with knowledge management, is this new notion of the circular economy. It's even better than recycling, right? We're talking about regenerative systems, because if we all have 8 billion people on this planet and we're depleting resources, that's unsustainable. I think we all agree with that. But there are new theories and practices emerging that they're called various things: regenerative economy, circular economy, and that's something to definitely focus on. And that's where the positive aspects are. We can create a future where these threats, are not going to be as significant. We can overcome those threats and still live prosperously and fulfilled in a fulfilled way without damaging our environment. So that's coming up. Don't steal too much more of Steve's thunder. You won't want to miss that. Annie, her specialty is of course a lot of specialties. Annie has digitization and whatnot, but her focus here will be on shifting from from hindsight to foresight. I want to just give that just to make a quick distinction. Prediction, right? Asserts the most probable scenario. So a lot of people are still trying to predict what's going to happen next quarter, what's going to happen next year. But trying to predict the future in this, I think you'll agree, in this crazy, complex, fast-changing environment, it's a fool's game, right? Especially where black swan events, things that pop up out of nowhere, surprises that pop up out of nowhere, kind of throw anybody's prediction of 72.3% chance of this happening. It throws it out the window, right? So foresight is more appropriate toward extraordinary leadership and leading toward the future. Foresight, on the other hand, recognizes multiple possible scenarios, charts a range of alternative paths, consequences, and responses. A range, right? So that you can be with agility prepared to respond to different alternative paths and also have clarity, which variables, because again, those 5 V's of information, right? We're bombarded, we can't monitor everything. So which variables do we monitor and what do they mean? That clarity is needed. How can you do all that? And again, this goes back to Annie's specialty. How do you keep track of all this stuff? Annie will tell you AI, right? And plus your human brain trust, right? So we use technology and tools to get better foresight, but we also need that human insight, right? The value of strategic foresight increases in direct proportion to the amount of uncertainty. So that's a little bit of taste for what's coming up on session number 3, 2 weeks from now. You won't want to miss that either. Hopefully you'll see that each of these are individual aspects of extraordinary leadership, yet they all tie together. They're all very equally important. So I urge you again to grab each of these. Only an hour out of your day, definitely worth it. And each of these sessions are going to be compact with lots of insightful information. John Lewis, change in innovation leadership, right? Extraordinary times call for a change in the underlying mental model. And I think it was Ron that said, you need to change mindsets, right? So how do you do that? John had models for that. I'm not surprised that it's inputs and outputs. Outside, there's a speed of change in the market, right? In the market you're operating in, both you professionally and you organizationally, right? How fast is your market changing and how fast are you changing vis-a-vis the changes in the market, right? And that goes back to that old question, are you falling behind, keeping pace? Catching up, or are you leading the change, right? Ari DeGoose, this is John found this quote, for an organization in the knowledge economy, the ability to learn faster than your competitors may be the only sustainable competitive advantage, right? So here you've got this, and what John is going to introduce, and you'll see this up here, boom, the cycle of innovation and learning, and that's knowledge management, right? We're constantly innovating and learning. And if we don't learn from our mistakes, we don't learn from our innovations, our successes and failures, we're going to be falling way behind because this is a knowledge economy and that's how you have to do it. But again, John has a model. He will give you the secret sauce. I've just given you this diagram here, innovate and learn at a speed at least as fast as the changes in your market. John will give you the model for doing that. And as he says, in our underlying models, which have been in place, they are no longer serving us, and the main paradigm shift is required. So what is that new paradigm? Change is constant. Innovation means learning. Learning is through story structure. So there's the hint as to what John's model is going to help you through. And don't you dare any of you dare say storytelling. It is not storytelling. It is a huge difference between storytelling is just a communications tool. John is going to walk us through how to incorporate story structure as a modality of leadership and getting people to transform and change mindsets through story structure. So I'm not going to steal that thunder. You're going to have to tune in session 4 to find out what that's all about. But believe me, it is not even close to storytelling. Okay. All right. That's John, session 4. Session 5. Mentioned John Hope. Is dialogue missing in conversational leadership, traditional leadership? It's not enough. Yeah, leaders like to coach and develop new leaders. That's all wonderful. But extraordinary times demand community-based approaches based on conversation and dialogue. And again, there's nobody better that I know of than John Hovell in leading this kind of facilitating this kind of workshop and developing the skills that you need to develop conversational leadership. So very notion of leadership is flawed, according to John. World has attempted to define leadership as a shared responsibility, but as he says down here, it's focused on developing individual capability, not adequate. What if leadership were instead based in dialogue and conversations? And I believe a lot of you believe that because you've indicated that in your chat responses, right? Leadership, collective aspiration and practice. And as in John Hovell's words, communityship, right? So that's what we're going to be looking at on June 14 as we look in the 4th style. The 5th style of leadership in week number 6 is adaptive leadership. Dr. Rudy Garrity has I know, spent decades working on what he calls learnership, all right? And he deals with it itself, from self all the way up to societal. Main problem is, and these are Rudy's words, and he really gets fired up about our dysfunctional system. This is where disinformation and misinformation and people just taking little snippets and making their decisions based on a 30-second soundbite, right? On all levels, government, institutional leaders at the apex of dysfunction, inability to reflect and achieve, which is true. That's that. So the reason that technology amplification, amplification of social media is so prominent is because people don't take time to look at things systemically. And Rudy is an expert at developing systemic thinking and systems thinking. And, undercurrents of educational limited, ill-informed, perversely driven citizens. Yeah, this is part of the dysfunctionality. So what do you do about that? We all know that's a problem. It's kind of crazy out there. Solution, learn to think. Know, lead, share, achieve, but life objectives. So Rudy's, again, I'm not going to steal. He has a model, just like John Lewis does. He calls his model integral learning. He's going to share that with you and why that's important. He calls that learnership. And that develops learning at a personal level, right? Learnership, leading and learning at a personal level, at an organizational level, but then going on. And you've indicated this in your comments, how we've got to go to higher, higher forms of thought, right? Higher levels of consciousness. So personal, organizational, community, and even all of society. So that's another one you're not going to want to miss. Adaptive leadership, but the idea of integral learning, learnership at all of these levels. Key if we're going to need it to succeed in this crazy changing world. All right. Session 7, the last style, democratic leadership. Main problem, virtual organizations have been around. COVID forced everybody online. Now that we're into this, and the great resignation is starting to taper off, but we're not likely to return to that old normal. So here's the reality is that organizational life is better operated virtually. And Bill has done a lot of his recent research on that and showing that just small self-organizing, self-managed teams forming networks are able to adjust spontaneously. And that produces what's called a free democratic enterprise. Okay. All right. So that's session number, week 7. style number 6, and that's June 28th. And you can read, oh, by the way, Bill has a very excellent article. Again, you can just Google Fortune magazine, Fortune, the Democratic Enterprise by Bill Halal. That's a groundbreaking article. And I think, it probably has over 1 million hits by now. So you'll definitely want to check that out in advance of Bill's talk on June 28th. There we are. Okay, so that kind of wraps it up. Any questions or thoughts or comments you'd like to pass along in the chat box, or raise your hand? You can talk verbally. We've got a few minutes for any other questions or thoughts from the audience. We invite your participation. While you're thinking of that, if you have anything, let me wrap up. So here's a few final thoughts, just from my own perspective, and hopefully I've been able to set the table for you and kind of whet your appetite for what's coming. I said Annie has worked very hard with us and the members of the team, and you're going to be getting every week the results of literally decades of research from each person. Each of the persons are speaking. This is their area of specialty. And again, the best part at the end, in the last week, will tie it all together. So the old rules no longer apply. You'll need to create new rules, sometimes on the fly, leading and thriving in extraordinary opportunities among all of these. I see my internet's acting up. So anyway, pay close attention to and anticipate the early warning signals. That's science-based research, give you the data and the foresight you need, right? The other two types of leadership, change and innovation-driven leadership and adaptive leadership, allow you to adjust, adapt, and even change the rules, okay? And then when things don't work out as anticipated, be prepared to quickly bounce back stronger than before. That you get from conversational and democratic participative leadership. And so instead of crashing and burning, we're sailing smooth. So I'll get to your questions in a minute, but what kind of extraordinary world are you going to help co-create? Let's see what, okay. I'm just checking the chat box for any questions. So anyway, let me wrap it up. What kind of extraordinary world are you going to co-create, help co-create? Will it look like this, which is what a lot of people are afraid of, or are we going to look like this? Believe me, it's totally up to us and bringing together those 8 billion minds in a very constructive and progressive way. All right. Thank you so much. Go forth and lead in extraordinary ways. I appreciate your participation, and please join us in the coming weeks. You're not going to be disappointed. Okay, Annie, let me turn it back over to you.
Yes, please join us and also spread the word. We'd love to get this out to a lot of people. So, when you get my emails and you get my LinkedIn's, forward them, send them out to people that you think might be interested in hearing these conversations. Okay. I again thank you for attending, and I really look forward to the next 7 weeks that we can enjoy these presentations. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Art and Annie. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for your comments and your participation.
Hey, John, we stopped the recording.